There must be some numbers.
I just need to clarify in terms of the climate context for you. If we cut emissions today, global temperatures are not likely to drop for about 1,000 years.
Right. But I just...
Now, the Climate Commission's first public meeting will be held in Geelong today. We'll give you details of where and at what time. Tim Flannery has been good enough to join us. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Steve. Good to be with you.
Round two with Andrew. Andrew's very much looking forward to it.
I'm going to be very polite, and we're not going to look back in the past.
We're going forward.
Tim, you're taking your Climate Commission to Geelong. What's the message here?
Well, look, really, the Climate Commission is an independent body, and what we're tasked with doing is just getting a better understanding of climate science and some of the economics and international politics around the climate issue out to the general public. So it's a broad consultation. We'll start with the BP refinery today to meet workers there and management there, then on to a lunch with some of the leading thinkers in the Geelong area, and then on to a public forum in the town hall at 5 p.m. tonight.
You say it's independent, but in fact it's paid by the government, appointed by the government, and all people that believe, as the government does, the man is heating the world dangerously, though, isn't it? That'd be true.
Well, let me just say that, the judiciary is paid by the government, the Reserve Bank Board's paid by the government, but they're independent in the same way we are. And I value my independence. I've been pretty tough on, John Howard and Kevin Rudd, both sides of politics on the climate issue over the years, and I'm determined to keep that independence because I think people need an unbiased and strategic view of this issue. In terms of sceptics on the Climate Commission, my issue with them really is that they're not sceptical enough. We've got a number of climate scientists who don't believe anything. They're incredibly sceptical about all data. They'll explain the projections, the climate projections to people with the various probabilities as they see them. Of course, at the low end of that series of probabilities is a sort of view that is pretty concordant with what the sceptics believe, which is the world won't heat up very much more than it is at present. But the chances of that happening, the science tells us, are probably 100 to 1 or 1,000 to 1. So we'd take a sceptic on board if they could convince us that the odds were greater. But I haven't seen the argument so far.
So, Tim, what do you say to a BP worker who looks you in the face today and says your carbon tax is going to cost me my job?
Well, I'm here to say we're not here to talk about the carbon tax. We can talk about the economics around it. We can talk
Well, you
about,
can't dodge that question. Why go to a BP oil refinery to talk to workers if you're not there to give them some comfort that the changes that are being talked about are not going to cost them their jobs?
Mate, we're not there to give anyone comfort. We're there
Well, you should be.
Well, why is that? You tell the government to give us a different briefing then. The briefing's to be independent and to try to engage people with it for a better understanding of the climate issue and the politics, the international politics and the economics around that issue. Now, we can talk about carbon pricing and, all of the options that the government has in front of it and all of the issues around that, but we're not going to be giving people comfort about losing jobs or not. That's not our brief. Right,
okay. Can we talk then about, you mentioned the economics and the consequences and the various options. No doubt you've modelled how much some of the policies in front of the public would be and what they'd achieve, i.e. how much will it cost to cut our emissions by the government's target of 5% by 2020, and how much will world's temperatures fall by as a consequence?
Sure. Look, we do have economists on the Commission who will be giving a very in-depth look at that this evening. I don't want to preempt their economic assessment of the various cost options. But in terms of how much this will cut temperatures, that really very much depends upon how Australia's position is seen overseas. And I've been talking...
We'll get on to that, Tim. I'm not going to dodge that. The argument is indeed that we have to set a lead and the world has to follow, and on our own we can't do it, blah, blah. But just looking at the basic facts so people can figure it out for themselves, what the world needs to come on board. On our own, cutting our emissions by 5% by 2020, what will that lower the world's temperatures by?
See, that's a bogus question because nothing is in isolation. The countries...
No, I know.
I'll looking at what's happening and therefore setting their policy directions according to that.
Tim, I'll go on to that in a minute. I'll go into it. Everyone understands that is the argument, but we're just trying to get basic facts without worrying about the consequences of what those facts might lead people to think. On our own, if by cutting our emissions, because it's a heavy price to pay, by 5% by 2020, what will the world's temperatures fall by as a consequence?
Look, it will be a very, very tiny increment. And in fact,
Have you got a number? I mean, there must be some numbers.
I just need to clarify in terms of the climate context for you. If we cut emissions today, global temperatures are not likely to drop for about 1,000 years.
Right. No, but I just want to get to this very basic fact. I'm finding it really curious. No, I'm finding it really curious that no one has got a fact. If I buy a car, I pay the money, I want to know how much it costs, and I want to know if it's going to do the job. In this case, I want to know the cost of cutting our emissions by 5% by 2020, and will it do the job? How much will the world's temperatures fall by if Australia cuts its emissions by this much?
Look, as I said, it'll be a very, very small increment.
Can you give us a rough figure?
I'm sorry, I can't, because it's a very complex system, and we're dealing with probabilities here. And
will we talk about... I'm just trying to get the facts in front of the public so we know what we're doing. Just unbiased. Is it about, I don't know, are you talking about 1,000th of a degree, 100th of a degree? What sort of rough figure?
Look, just let me finish and say this, that if the world as a whole cut all emissions tomorrow, the average temperature of the planet's not going to drop for several hundred years, perhaps as much as 1,000 years, right? Because the system is overburdened with CO2 that has to be absorbed, and that only happens slowly.
That doesn't seem a good deal.
What's that, sorry?
That doesn't seem a good deal. If we spend trillions of dollars to cut the world's emissions, that we won't notice the difference. Well, our great-great-great-great-grandchildren won't even notice the difference.
It'll just keep getting worse if we don't. That's the problem.
But I just want to get back to the facts, because someone surely must have done the sums, and I'm looking at some sums here. Someone surely must have done the sums that for all these billions of dollars we're spending in programs, that it's going to have a consequence in terms of cutting the world's temperatures. So you don't know about Australia, you don't know, but you wouldn't dispute that it's in about 1,000th of a degree, around that magnitude, right?
It's going to be small. As I said, if we cut emissions tomorrow globally...
Hard facts, Tim, hard facts.
For a long time. But this is a hard fact. It's not going to drop, right, for a long time.
So it's not going to drop, and it's not going to be anything we notice. All right, well, look, you said it's about getting the world on board, all right? Let's say the world follows our lead. By how much? By, say, 2,100 then. 2,100, will the spending of these trillions, by how much will that cut the world's temperatures to the nearest 1,000th of a degree?
It's not going to drop for hundreds of years if we stop now, right? Most likely. Something may happen, but the models are suggesting at the moment that we're not going to see an appreciable drop for some time. The difficulty is if we keep building the CO2, the temperatures are going to increase.
All right. Can I ask one last thing? Julia Gillard said that her side of the argument, which is man's heating the world dangerously, we've got to act, etc., is backed, she said, by every reputable climate scientist in the world. That's not true, is it?
Look, it's backed by every major academic institution, by all of the academies, the major academies.
Maybe, but I'm just looking at her actual words. Every reputable climate scientist in the world. That's not true, is it?
I would have to think back and see who there is.
All right, Professor Richard Lindzen of Massachusetts Institute of Technology. You said he's reputable, isn't he?
He's one who comes to mind. He is reputable, and he has a different view.
Roger Pielke, John Christie, Professor John Christie.
I wouldn't put them in the same category as Lindzen. I think Lindzen.
Professor John Christie is director of the Earth Systems Science Centre at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. IPCC person.
I do know him, but I wouldn't put him in the same category.
No, but you'd say he's reputable, wouldn't you? You wouldn't say he's disreputable.
As a climate scientist, I'm not.
Tim and Andrew, you only need one.
Well,
that's right.
All right,
you got one.
Professor Svensmark, Fred Singer, Roger Pielke Senior, a professor from Japan, Kimimori Ito. These are reputable scientists. So Julia Gillard's wrong, isn't she, when she says every reputable scientist in the world supports it?
I would say with Lindzen as the exception, who's generally regarded as reputable.
And the others are disreputable.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go and tell them.
Their reputation is less than, I'd say.
Well,
okay. Tim,
seems to me we're being spread a bit of flannel by this government, I'm afraid, Tim. And I just wonder whether people will, knowing how little their efforts will mean, are going to support this tax.
Geelong West Town Hall tonight. Tim, who do you expect to turn up?
Their efforts may mean quite a lot. We hope that people who are interested in this issue and who want to make a contribution in terms of increasing their understanding and then engaging with the debate.
Okay.
No one's got all the answers for this, but it's very important. As you guys know, the stakes for the country are high either way. we need to do this as effectively and as cost effectively as we can. So it's important that we get good information out there to the public and unbiased information. And so we can then, start heading towards the right decision.
Righto, Tim. Thank you for making yourself available.
Thank you
very much.
Tim Flannery there, 20 minutes past 8, came on. I mean, give him credit for that.
Give him credit. Give him credit.
Because there's a lot of people who dodge this 45 minutes.